Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Schiff Show. I can't believe it's already time for another one. I'm Captain Brian Schiff, flight instructor and airline captain. Welcome again to the 13th episode of the Schiff Show, which is an educational aviation variety show educating pilots. During this episode, we'll be discussing a topic that is the real culprit to most accidents. You've heard me say time and time again that pilots who get into their airplanes, like you and I get into our cars, with the same mindset, are the ones generally getting into accidents. Well, it's that mindset that we're going to take a look at. I've been trying to teach for so long. But starting this month, we've got some exciting changes coming to the Schiff Show. We're calling it 2.0. This episode introduces some very fun changes, including some things that nobody's ever done before. We'll be having giveaways. People have done that for our best performing game show participants. Most uniquely, you can complete your flight review through the Schiff Show's continuing education program. In other words, each episode will complete a phase of wings if you go through the whole process. Completing a phase of wings is like getting a flight review. You just present your completion certificates from each of the Schiff Show episode courses to cover the proof of the time you spent on 3 knowledge credits. Then your CFI can review this content during pre and post flight. You're going to fly a scenario that kind of goes along with what we're teaching, how to prevent this kind of an accident. And each episode will include a syllabus for the flight that accompanies that Schiff Show, and that will be worth 3 flight credits. So again, 3 knowledge credits, 3 flight credits, that completes a phase. Completing a phase gives you a flight review. We'll add instructions to the episode page under Earn Wings Credit /flight review to explain this process on the main page of the Schiff Show. Watch for more information about this in my emails. If you're not subscribed to my emails, you can go to the schiffshow.tv webpage and click on the link on the top to subscribe, and you'll get more information about this program and more information. You'll also see the game show winners, the standings of who's on top and where you stand in the whole scheme of things. We'll talk more about that when we get to the game show part of this program tonight. The Schiff Show website, the web page, will serve as your only stop. It's like a one-stop place to do everything you need to accomplish your wings credits and get your flight review and everything. So it really is simplifying it. So again, complete your flight review using the Schiff Show, and stay tuned to hear more about that in the email that follows this and on the Schiff Show website. Tonight, I'm really excited to welcome Tammy Barlette, Lieutenant Colonel Tammy Barlette. She's a retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and fighter pilot with over 20 years of military aviation experience. She's flown the T-37, A-10, T-38, the MQ-1 Predator, and the MQ-9 Reaper. She's served as both combat instructor and, both combat pilot and instructor pilot, and accumulated over 3,000 hours doing that. Notably, she's also a graduate of the prestigious U.S. Air Force Weapons School. Since retiring from military aviation, she has devoted herself to the study of mental performance training, translating principles used by elite athletes into practical, repeatable tools for pilots. And she's the founder and CEO of CrossCheck Mental Performance, where she teaches a popular online course that helps aviators build confidence, improve focus, and perform effectively under pressure. Basically teaching the things, the soft stuff, not the hard stuff that I've been trying to teach, and I'm thrilled to have her with us tonight. Welcome, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I look at the airplanes that you've flown, and I'm envious. That's had to be, I've flown a lot of neat airplanes myself, but flying those, teaching them, it had to be a real blast.
Oh yeah, it was a blessing. It was awesome. Best thing ever.
That's cool. So what got you into getting into the mental aspect of preparedness and mental performance training?
Well, the last 6 years of my career I spent as a full-time reservist teaching in the T-38. And actually, my first assignment was as a T-37 instructor pilot at Laughlin Air Force Base, which is where I ended my career. So I spent a lot of time teaching, plus weapons school and all that. And what I realized is that I focused a lot of energy on getting the student pilots out of their own head so I could actually teach them, because they wouldn't learn very effectively if they're just spinning in their own mind. And when I discovered that the things that I was teaching were things that were being taught to elite athletes under the umbrella of mental performance training, I couldn't get enough. I wanted to go learn more so I could have more tools than what I just kind of discovered on my own. So that's what really got it going.
Well, that's really cool. And I think it's woefully lacking in the aviation industry. It's still a relatively young industry. But I also think that a lot of flight instructors are creatively doing this, and I think you're going to mention this later, without even realizing it, trying to get your students to calm down and trying to get them out of their own head along the way. And I think that is one of the things that I've tried to say a lot is about the attitude going into it. It's about your mindset. It's a safety mindset. And I really look forward to chatting about that kind of stuff with you as we go through this hour.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of instructors are teaching some of this, not realizing it. What I see this as more of a partnership with instructors, and this isn't just for student pilots. We teach everybody from 0 hours all the way up through experienced airline captains who have taken the course. But the idea is, when it comes to CFIs, it's a support for them because it's better for you to teach a student who's teachable than to try and teach them how to not be anxious and stressed on top of trying to teach them how to fly. That just takes away from their flight time and your time, and it just makes it more expensive for everyone.
Yeah, and less enjoyable. No, that's fantastic. And I saw bits and pieces of what the course that you offer, and I was so impressed I included a piece of it in the preview for this program. And there's a longer blurb of that in the course resources as a sample to the kind of talk. And it's not complicated stuff. It's really basically simple thinking, and it's just a way of looking at something. And I think that's really cool. So most people can relate to it.
Yeah, it is very simple. In fact, I had a student call me once at the end of the course, and she said, I wanted to tell you I was really hesitant because she actually signed up for the course and then she asked for her money back. So I don't think I want to do this. And then she's like, well, I heard good things about it. So she took it, and she was a little resistant the whole time. But at the end, she called me and she said, I was looking for the magic switch, or the thing that was going to make this all fit. But you told me that it was a bunch of simple things layered on top of each other. And she said, it's true. And she said that the thing that she said that was so awesome, and this is why I love doing what I do, is she said, I use what you teach me every single day, and not just in aviation, which this content is not specific to aviation, but I think it's so important in aviation because, like I like to say, you can't just pull over on a cloud. That's not an option. So you have to keep your mind in the game, and things will go wrong. That everybody will have something go wrong, whether it's with the airplane or yourself or just you're stressed,
Yeah, very good point. I can see how learning these techniques can get you not only through aviation, but through life, because we're constantly being exposed to risks and hazards and things that go wrong, and learning how to handle that and having the right mindset can really, change how you are affected by these things. So, well, that's very cool. Well, let's dive into it. Tonight, we're going to look at an accident. Of course, our topic is when confidence outpaces preparation. We're going to look at a few procedures. Most of them will be in the course resources. And then we're going to talk about some of Tammy's techniques and what she teaches with this. But what does that mean to you, basically, when confidence outpaces performance? What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, I like to say that you don't want to have false confidence. Like when you start something and you don't have confidence, I recommend people utilize other people's confidence in you to give yourself some belief and provide some temporary confidence. But eventually that needs to be true confidence. And I think a lot of times people don't actually build the true confidence, but they think they can because they've done so many other things. When people showed up to pilot training, I started giving a brief on confidence, because what happened with a lot of them, and this happens with other people in aviation as well, is that in order to get to U.S. Air Force pilot training, you have to be a high performer. So a lot of these students that showed up had never failed at anything in their entire life. And so what I would have to share with them is that you are all now here together, and someone is going to be at the bottom, and it might be you, and you've never failed at anything before. So you have to, be humble and ask for help. And if it's not you that's struggling, you help other people. But, a lot of times people just think, oh, well, I've done X, Y, and Z, and those things are really hard, so I can do this. And they just bring that attitude with them, and they don't do the training that goes along with it to make it match their confidence level.
That's fascinating. And I think that's a lot of what went into this accident that we're going to look at tonight. So good segue on that. Well, again, every episode is going to cover an accident. We'll talk about procedures, techniques, and technology that can help you avoid that kind of an accident. And now with the flight portion in the course resources in the course, we're going to complete a flight review and take this full circle and go flying and try to avoid this kind of an accident. And then, of course, we'll play the game. And the game show has been modified. Some of you have already connected. I think that's great. We're going to play this game. We're going to keep score, and we're going to have a leaderboard. You'll have rankings. You'll also compete with yourself, because the more you do, the more points you get, the bigger the prizes you'll get. And we'll see at Oshkosh for the grand prizes during the live Schiff show. But let's move on with it. First, we'll start out with the accident review that I was referring to. This is an accident of the colloquial, I'm not going to say Dr. Killer, but I was going to, but I'm not. The Bonanza, September 7th, 2015, an A36 crashed shortly after entering IMC. Nothing was wrong with the airplane. The pilot, who was a lawyer and had recently purchased the Bonanza, was a step up from his Piper Cherokee 180, a significant step up. The accident had happened shortly after purchasing the airplane. And again, high achiever, lawyer, doctors, and that's why the joke goes. It's joke, but it's sad, and I want to acknowledge the fact that it's a very serious topic. And someone had to perish to make this something that we're studying. So I do acknowledge that. So this pilot was attempting an ILS into the Greensboro airport and lost control once they entered IMC, and the pilot was not instrument current or proficient. A look at the logbook might have revealed that the pilot was current, but I did some deeper research and noticed that some of the flights that were logging approaches, there was no safety pilot. When there's no safety pilot, well, you better be IMC or you better be in a simulator. Well, it wasn't in a simulator, it was in the airplane. There's no safety pilot, and a casual look at the weather on that day at that airport showed it was clear and visibility unrestricted. So I also noticed and learned while studying the logbooks of this pilot that basically every flight that was on an IFR flight plan was logged IFR. Didn't necessarily have to be IMC to log instrument time. And also if he shot an approach on that flight plan, regardless of whether it was VFR, VMC or IMC, I should say, it was logged as an approach. That is not the spirit of the rule. Again, this was a private pilot. He was instrument rated and had approximately 850 hours total time, most of it in his Cherokee 180. The logbook was incomplete with numerous discrepancies, and in fact, he had been violated for flying without a current medical previously. He, again, like I said, he logged actual when he wasn't in the clouds. He logged approaches when they weren't valid. There was no holding, intercepting, or tracking logged in the logbook, not the things that would require a pilot to have to do to maintain currency were not in the logbook. When he transitioned to the A36 Bonanza, he received a little bit of training, but it was not adequate for the flight that he was undertaking here. His Cherokee 180, which he still owned at the time, would have been the proper aircraft for this mission because he was familiar with it and the avionics, and it wasn't quite a little bit farther ahead of him like the Bonanza was. He had limited experience in the Bonanza and in high-performance aircraft, 6 hours in total, and much of that was the cross-country flight. He disregarded advice from his CFI who checked him out not to fly IFR. The checkout did not include any the Bonanza Society materials or for training. The CFI said the goal was to just do a VFR checkout, not to establish IFR proficiency. He told him to get more time in the airplane before flying at IFR. Well, he didn't listen to that. Only recently had he obtained the high performance and complex endorsements. While that makes you legal, you're still a novice in operating those aircraft. He did not meet the insurance requirements for flying that aircraft. The insurance company required 50 hours in complex airplanes. He only had 29. And this is to operate as pilot in command. So on this flight, he did, and had a passenger on board as well. Some more details about the flight: that he didn't obtain a full pre-flight briefing. He was very hurried through it because he wanted to beat oncoming weather getting out of Florida. And he, even before that, on the previous leg, departed in dense fog with someone on board who refused to fly with him on the next leg, departed in dense fog without an IFR clearance. Now, we can debate whether that's legal or not, and there are cases where that is legal, but certainly not safe. Fuel planning was deficient. He arrived on fumes. barely any fuel. He was told to intercept the localizer, this is back in Greensboro, outside of the final approach fix, but flew GPS direct to the final approach fix instead of flying his vectored heading to intercept the localizer. That wound up, not being able to get on the glide slope. It caused him to botch the approach. He broke off the approach. Actually, ATC said, all right, tell you what, we're going to break off the approach, and because he never actually got on course. No checklists were used. He did not ask ATC for any help when it was kind of clear that things weren't going right. The autopilot at some point tripped off during the maneuvering, possibly when the engine might have misfired during the fuel unporting, because in a Bonanza, if you're doing some maneuvering that's uncoordinated with very little fuel in the tank, you can unport one of the lines, the fuel lines, and you can get maybe some misfiring of the engine. And during that, he possibly became disoriented and never did re-engage the autopilot. Once this spatial disorientation process started, it just kept going until the accident. And the ground path, when he was told to fly a heading on a downwind, looked something like this. And he couldn't maintain a heading or altitude. He was flying erratically and eventually crashed after breaking out of the cloud bases. And here's a picture of the aircraft after the accident. Very sad. And again, one of the taglines is when your ego gets ahead of your capabilities, and there may be some of that here. Some contributing factors to this accident. There was inadequate training and preparation for the mission at hand. I would say he was probably partially through a complete checkout. Some poor decision making along the way, not being IFR current or proficient, yet choosing to fly into IMC. He did not follow his instructor's advice not to fly IFR until he finished getting the checkout. In fact, he flew when the insurance company didn't even have him. He didn't have the hours required by the insurance company. So some hazardous attitudes come into play here. We've heard about them. Yes, impulse, and this kind of brings them to light. Impulsivity, maybe invulnerability, or, the rules don't apply to me kind of attitude because, he flew without a medical. He did a lot of things and broke a lot of rules, which kind of didn't cause the accident, but that's kind of, again, a mindset that sets forward. The probable cause by the NTSB was that the pilot's loss of airplane control due to spatial disorientation, which resulted in an aerodynamic stall spin. Well, that's pretty generic. We know that happened, and it's kind of like, well, it's like saying the airplane crashed because it hit the ground too hard. But why did it happen? What led to this? And as we get going, we'll examine some more of this. But what do you think led to, Tammy, the loss of spatial, the loss of control, just and the crash? Well, what happened before this to lead to that the NTSB says?
I mean, I think the biggest causal, in my humble opinion, based on my background, is cognitive overload. There was just too much for his brain to manage, and more was getting thrown at it. It doesn't sound like he was taking actions to decrease that cognitive overload. I mean, we have to recognize it first, right? So that's part of what we teach in our program is how do you recognize that? Because a lot of people don't know their own clues. So they're getting to the point where they're having issues. So I think that's a huge thing, that mental bandwidth thing, and you were talking about, taking on a plane that he didn't quite have the experience for and essentially breaking a lot of rules, in my opinion, when you're not following the hours and you don't have what the insurance wants you to have. I think a lot of that comparison can come into play. Maybe, he has a lot of buddies who, they upgraded to Bonanzas or high performance aircraft and they're flying them and they're doing fine. And maybe he, I'm like, oh, well, I'm a, what was he, a lawyer? I'm super smart. And this guy only, there might be that going on. I'm not saying that's okay, but humans do that. Right. So a lot of what I teach is the humanness that comes out. And so we think, oh, I can do it too. And if that person can do it, I can do it. And not really, checking the box of making sure I'm good to go.
It's interesting. Concepts I hadn't thought of, but that makes a lot of sense. I'm constantly right on the edge of cognitive overload, so I'm very familiar with that. It doesn't take much for me.
Well, and it happens. I mean, it's true that age can make it worse too. It's things happen, and there's a lot of things that can decrease your ability to your mental bandwidth, and we all know that, but we don't consciously address it necessarily.
Right.
You know, whether it's you have something, you're having a fight with your wife, or you didn't get enough sleep, or you're like getting older, whatever it might be, you have to have a way to determine, hey, I'm a little slower today. I'm not unsafe, but I'm a little slower. So I'm gonna not go in instrument conditions today, or I'm gonna let my co-pilot know, let's just back each other up a little bit more, things like that.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you say that, because I can relate to that as myself as I'm getting a little older now that I'm in my 30s. I can think to you're laughing. I know. But no, I'm in my 50s, upper 50s, and arguably starting around age 40 and moving up my way in the 40s, I noticed that I'm not as sharp and fast as I used to be. I do recognize that. But also, now that you mix that with the 30,000 or 25,000 hours under my belt, things I've seen, habits I've formed, I think that I mitigate that by, okay, we're going to ratchet back a notch here. I'm not going to, now my tube is maybe went from this big to this big, so I'm not going to try to shove as much through it. I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to do 1 or 2 things at a time instead of 5 or 6 things at a time. So I mitigate and recognize that. So I think that's a big part of it. I think I've done that without really even realizing it.
Right. A lot of people do things like that. And as you get more experience too, so sometimes it can increase anxiety because you have more experience to know what ifs, because things have happened, right? And so to other people, and so now your mind's going, well, this could happen, that could, and now it's even more overloaded in a way. So
yeah, very fair. That's absolutely true. Well, let's get into the procedures that we talk about. And in procedures, I kind of consider what the FAA gives us in books, regs, the AIM, the training materials, or advisory circulars that can keep this accident from happening. And certainly there's a lot given to us by the FAA on transitioning to complex airplanes. And there's an advisory circular on it. It's in the airplane flying handbook. It's in all kinds of documentation. It's in the FARs, in the endorsements that we're required to have. All of these are, I've collected them and put them in one place for you in the course resources of this program, so that you can kind of go look at them, rather than now that we're mixing the course resources are also giving you Wings credit. And in addition to the program tonight, after you take the Wings quiz, you are responsible to go look at those to get that. And we can actually streamline this program a little bit more. So I want you, as I've given you the tip of the iceberg here on these things, you have to have these endorsements and things to keep you current. Again, this is just the tip of the iceberg that I can list these things. To fly at a Bonanza, you need a complex endorsement, a high performance endorsement. If you're flying something pressurized or anything that goes over, capable of going over 25,000 feet, you need an endorsement for that. And then, of course, all the things to keep you current. So I'm going to encourage you to go to the course resources and look at those, get your Wings credit for that as well. So while we're talking about upgrading to a more complex airplane, have you ever done that, Tammy? Have you upgraded from something more simple to more fast and powerful?
Absolutely. Multiple times. I remember I flew mostly the Piper Warrior before I got in the Air Force. The Air Force had us get 40 hours. And then you jump right in the T-37, a 2-engine low-wing aerobatic jet where you're wearing all the gear and the mat. I mean, just wearing the gear for some people was really overwhelming. And then people like me getting sick, that took mental bandwidth that other people didn't have to have taken from them. Then I went on to fly the A-10. So it flew a lot like the T-37.
Oh, really?
I flew the T-38 as a student as well. That was obviously an upgrade from T-37 to T-38 because the T-38 is like a fighter jet. That was a big jump. And I have a good story, if we have time to share, about a student of mine when he transitioned to the T-38. Then I went to the A-10 and then I flew the MQ-1 Predator. And when I went to weapons school, they gave me 3 rides and a check ride to upgrade to the MQ-9, which there's a lot of things similar, but there's a lot of things different, and it's a lot bigger. It has a lot more weapons.
You didn't get airsick flying those, I'm guessing.
No, I didn't. I didn't get airsick, thankfully. Yes, I even got to fly it like pregnant all the way till 40 or 36 weeks. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's very cool. No. So what was with your student that was upgrading?
Yeah. So this student of mine, he showed up to work one day, and this is the first time I've flown with him, and it's in the T-38. I'm probably 16 years into my career at this point, a lot of experience, and I was just like reading him before we went to fly. So I'm doing the briefing, and he is pre-solo. He's still several rides away from soloing. So he had flown the T6, and now he's in the T-38. So it's a little fighter trainer, and he just looked like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. I like to observe my students when I'm giving them the briefing where, here's the mission, here's the objectives, here's the plan. And as I'm talking through the plan, I kind of pay attention to where they are at. Because although I've read their grade book is not flying, they're flying. And I think it's important to consider where are they emotionally, where do they seem to be mentally? And I always pay attention to that and incorporate that into my instruction because I think it matters. And so he just seemed like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Now, flying the T-38 is extremely, it's intense, but usually that heaviness is offset because of it's so much fun. I mean, what these students are getting to do? They're getting to go fly super fast every day and go upside down and fly formation. Well, he wasn't in formation yet, but anyways, the bottom line is we went to go fly, and I could very quickly see that he was a really good pilot, but he didn't see that. And so I decided that my role that day, because I believe as an instructor, I need to modify my instruction based on the needs of the student, and the student shouldn't have to modify how they learn based on how I instruct, which happens sometimes, right?
Right.
So I'm modifying my instructional style. I decide that today I'm going to be a confidence coach, not a backseat cheerleader, not like, yay, you did everything right, but I need to build his confidence because he doesn't think he can do it. And I need him to know he can do this. So I was just throwing things at him that were, helpful, kind of keeping him, let's keep him in the area. Let's stop him from overging the jet at the bottom. I mean, some of those are just normal, good instructor duties, but I was spending a little bit more time on just that encouragement. And we got back and I started the debrief, just like, here was our mission, here's our objectives, here's the plan. And normally we would go into everything. And I stopped and I looked at him and I said, I need to ask you a question. I said, how are you doing today?
Probably threw him.
Yeah. He looked at me like I had 3 eyeballs. And he was like, you could see on his face, he thought, this isn't a question we get asked in fighter training. No one seems to care. Is this a trick?
Yeah.
And I finally just looked at him. I said, here's the deal. I'm picking up feelings of defeat. And he instantly went like this. Yeah. I don't think I'm supposed to be here. I didn't have any trouble landing the T6, but I can't land the T-38. And I was instantly relieved. And I explained to this young man, I said, you know what? That's not a problem. I said, the T-38 is the one of the most difficult aircraft in the entire Air Force inventory to land. Tiny little wings, tiny little gear, landing at speeds upwards 165, 100, not super fast. It's just going to take time. And I don't see anything in your grade book or what I saw you do today that tells me that you can't be there by the time you need to be there. Now, I want you all to pay attention to the fact that I could have gone through this flight and I could have said, okay, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. This is how you fix this. This is how you fix that. And I honestly, in my heart, believe it wouldn't have done any good. He needed to believe that he could do it. That was the problem. If you don't get to the root cause of the problems in your debriefs, you're not really debriefing effectively. But in this case, it was a mental performance problem, right? He didn't think he could do it. And it actually is significantly important that you believe you can do it.
Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right?
Exactly.
Or you need
and he went on to fly the F-16. Yeah, he was
that's great. That's fantastic. I wonder if that was my co-pilot. Last co-pilot I flew with, he was an F-16 driver. Very confident, though. No lack of that. But I think that that's a great lesson. I think it should go off. Any flight instructors watching this should kind of take heed and pay attention to your students. And I love the fact that you mentioned adapting your training to how your student learns and not expecting the student to adapt their learning to how you teach. That's fantastic. I'm going to steal that.
Well, I think of myself as a detective, like that's how I make it. And so instead of letting get it frustrated because this kid is not picking this up, however, I
Yeah.
look at it and go, okay, what am I doing wrong? How can I explain this different or better? And I put on that thinking cap.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm really trying to do, and help them the best that I possibly can. And it's going to be different for everyone.
Right. No, that's fantastic. Well, that's very cool. And that kind of is a good segue into the next section where we're going to talk about the techniques involved in trying to teach people how to have this confidence, how to get the right mental mindset on that. I would like to teach people not to get into their airplanes like they get into their car. Don't just get in and go. It's a different kind of mindset. And the what ifs that you were talking about are huge. But one of the things you were saying is that, we need to prepare for the unexpected, and we learn all kinds of things, the technical skills, the knowledge, but we're not taught how to think, feel, and respond to something that happens. And I think that's much needed. So what do you say about that? How do you teach those things?
Yeah, well, first, I like to think about, just to give a baseline foundation. I think that, preparing for the expected, that's average, right? Preparing for the unexpected, like the procedures you're talking about, we go over emergency procedures, we go through the what ifs.
Yeah.
That's above average. But if you want to be elite, you include how you want to think, feel, and respond in those circumstances. So you go through those, you put worst case scenario into your head, you visualize it's actually happening. And to me, this is different than chair flying. I differentiate. Chair flying is more like procedures, switches, flows, that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But when you get to this, and they can be combined, don't get me wrong, but the visualization piece you can do it independently, where you're picturing that this emergency is happening, something bad is happening, and you actually visualize, the fire light or whatever it is, and you picture every sense you can, meaning like, what are you seeing? Are you smelling anything? And then what do you want to feel? And practice it. Because honestly, just like a basketball player wouldn't go out on the court with a new technique and not practice it, you have to practice this in your mind. How do you want to think when this happens? How do you want to feel? And how do you want to respond, not react to this? Because you can practice those things. Most people, when they get in emergency, if they haven't been in that situation, half your brain feels like it's totally just it's not even there anymore. And you're going, oh my gosh. And then you're completely overloaded. That cognitive margin is gone. And now you're just trying to survive, and you don't even know what to do. Yeah. So one of the things the Air Force did for me, and I'll share this really quickly, is if there's Air Force pilots out there, they know what a stand-up is. And I'll share what it is because I truly believe this was a significant, it had a significant impact on this aspect of my career. When I had emergencies happen in the Air Force, I was worried the first time. I was like, what if I don't react like I think I should? Mm-hmm. And every time I had an emergency, with the exception of the one time that I shouldn't have been flying, it was like boom, 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 boom. But why did that happen? I don't think it was because the emergency procedure simulators. I think it was the stand-up. So what would happen in pilot training is they would put us, they would put the instructors around the edges. There was one instructor in the front giving an emergency, and they'd say, okay, the winds are 130 at 10. It's clear in a million. You're on runway 13. You're rolling down the runway. You hit, 120 knots, and you see a red light. Lieutenant Barlette, you have the aircraft. And so I'd have to stand up with my checklist and in-flight guide, put it on the table, stand at attention. Roger, I have the aircraft. I'm going to maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, take the proper action, and land as soon as conditions permit. I'm going to maintain aircraft control. Bye. And we'd have to go through everything. We'd ask questions like, what is the red light? Is the red light a fire light? Maybe it's just some other red light that's in the cockpit. We had to ask all these questions and dig it all out. And what I'm getting at is a lot of people felt like it was hazing, because it sure felt like it. But the one thing that did that was truly incredible is it created a kind of stress you can't simulate. That peer pressure, like perform in front of other stress, especially in an environment like that, it was incredibly heavy. So you have all the instructors watching, you have all the students watching, and you have to maintain composure. That's was key. And the thing is, if we didn't do it right, they'd say, Lieutenant Barlette, sit down. And you were done flying for the day, and you had to sit there and study.
Wow, that sounds like a fantastic exercise. I would have loved to have seen it or participate in that, although I'd probably embarrass myself. But that
Always brutal.
I can see where that would work. Yeah. So
Yeah.
another aspect of this, and when we were talking before, you mentioned that there's some things you can say to yourself to get yourself back.
Hmm.
I don't know, refocus or whatever. But uh, what do you say in a stressful situation to get back to the present?
Yeah. Well,
And,
first, let me
and
share there is a more advanced technique that's much more effective, but I like to be able to teach things quickly to people when I don't have a lot of time. So this is the technique I teach. A lot of times when we're struggling, like let's say we just made a mistake.
yeah,
There's two places people mostly go. They go to the future. They go, what if that happens again? What am I, what in they just dread it, right?
yeah,
So now we're in the future with anxiety. Or they replay the mistake and they're in the past, replaying it again and again and again and thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that. And believe me, I've been here, done this. But what we need to do is we need to be in the present. It sounds, again, very simple, right? But how do you get yourself to the present? I say, what now? What now? Because it'll tell your brain to be in this moment right now. What am I doing right now? What do I need to do right now? And it could be aviate, right? Aviate, navigate, communicate. It depends on,
yeah.
but what now works really well to bring your brain to the moment and stop that future past
Yeah.
deviation.
Yeah, that's good. What now? It seems to work pretty good because now is now, and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to solve the problem. At the airline, we say, "My aircraft" is the first thing the flying pilot has to say, and there's things that go along with that. That's the aviate, navigate,
Mm-hmm.
communicate part of it, and you're going to do those things no matter what happens. And funny thing is, we joke about it. We'll be on the ground, and the fuel thing will go off. Ding! Oh, my aircraft. We joke about it, and not even in flying situations. So anyway, it sounds like a good thing, a good technique, bring you back to the present. But having confidence is an important thing, but not having too much for your experience and your level.
Mm-hmm.
And you say it's trainable. You can teach people to have confidence. It sounds like you did that with that student who didn't think he should be there.
Yeah, it absolutely is trainable. And it's not something that you just have or you don't. And it's not something once you get it can't go away. It can be mobile. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
always stay the same. And you have to, when you get to a point where you're lacking confidence, even though you have experience, it's okay. I mean, there's ways around that. So what do we do? I think a lot of times it's a matter of one of the simplest things we can do is give ourselves credit. We oftentimes don't give ourselves credit, especially I think as pilots, we're very driven at, what's the next thing? Where can we go next? And we're looking at the person in front of us. We want to be that person. And we check the box of the thing we did and we're off. Instead of pausing and going, wow, look what I did. Because a lot of times pilots surround themselves with pilots who are where they want to be. And
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people will be in my course and be like, but I'm pre-solo and then they solo and they're like, I just soloed. I'm like, are you just solo? That's amazing.
Yeah, I have
Celebrate.
passengers on the airplane come up to me and they they'll say something that makes me realize they must be a pilot. I'm like, do you fly? Oh yeah, but I'm just a private pilot. I just fly a Cessna. I'm like, oh, don't say just. Half of the airline pilots here probably couldn't get in that Cessna right now and fly it. So you're right. You're right. You shouldn't put yourself down.
So you're already doing something I teach.
Yeah.
Don't say just.
Right. Right. Oh, I'm only an ATP. So when you're studying to recall information, struggling to recall information under pressure,
Mm-hmm.
why isn't it simply studying always the best solution?
Yeah, that's funny. It's what we naturally think to do. So Dr. Michael Gervais is a world-renowned sport and performance psychologist, and he says that there's three things we can train: our mind, our body, and our craft. So I'll go in reverse order and I'll call our craft our skill set. Like our skill set, we train our skill set all the time as pilots, that massively, ton of it, right? Tons of it. I won't go into it, but we all know that.
Sure.
Our body, we understand we should get sleep, we should eat. Whether you do those things or not, I don't know, but people understand and give credence to that, right? But our mind, most people don't actually train. So that's where a lot of times a problem comes in, because if you can have all that in your brain, but if you can't access it once the stress is hitting, then it's useless, right? So then sometimes what happens is people can't access it when they're maybe in a check ride or a stressful situation. So they go study more, and then it happens again and they don't understand. I studied more. Now we're creating more anxiety. And I'm not saying not to study or not to do sims. Those are obviously very important things that we do. But you need to learn how to manage your stress so that you can have access to that information and it isn't cut off from you.
That's interesting. There are occasions when I'm not flying and I get into stressful situations and I'm a total blank on what I'm supposed to do next. But for some reason, when I'm flying an airplane, I revert back to my training. I revert back to my dad's going to call me out on that. You're not supposed to say revert back because it's redundant. You just say revert. So that's another that teach a little bit of English, the Barry Schiff way. So we're full of some more Schiff tonight. You don't say revert back. I just caught it, Dad. You revert to your training, and in aviation and the emergencies that I've had when I'm under stress, I've been able to access the information. I know right where it is for some reason. But the last thing is you provide mental performance training, and when it's applied effectively, you say that a pilot is more likely to be able to recognize the problem, recover, and continue flying, which I think is fascinating. And I think every pilot needs to go through this, and every training program should probably employ some version of that. So
yeah, it's really important. It's a lot of it comes down to self-awareness. Yeah. And someone I love to learn from is Dr. Nate Zinsser, and he says that self-awareness is a superpower. And I truly believe that when it comes to flying, in this aspect of flying, you have to know yourself, and everyone's different, but what causes you stress? What can you do about it? Practice those techniques on the ground so you can employ them in the air. Because if you don't, it's like some of the techniques I teach, if you don't practice them on the ground, when you get stressed out, guess what? You're going to forget them. You're not going to have access to them. So you need to practice them. And you can put little things in your checklist. Like if you identify known stress points, whether it's, intercepting the ILS or, getting the final approach fix, or maybe you're flying a Cessna and you're in the pattern that always freaks you out, add like a little like reset inside your downwind. I know it sounds like crazy, but
like an M&M.
An M&M.
I used to that candy on the downwind every leg. I'd give them a piece of chocolate if they did great, and it would just be like a Skittle if they weren't that great.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, do whatever works for you. Yeah.
Right. And I think preparedness is a big part of it. Like when we are worried about an engine failure after takeoff, those who don't survive that, I think we're never even thinking about it, and it's an oh crap. But what they should be doing is always looking for the what ifs, like you said earlier. What if this happens? What if that happens? If this happens, then I'm going to do that. Well, I like to say when it happens, then I'm going to do this. I'm going to go for that field. I'm going to power off, and lo and behold, I'm climbing out, and it never happened. Oh well, I don't get to, so it didn't happen. But if it does happen, something bad does happen, and you are ready for it, you say, oh, yep, there it is. Here I go, and it's not as big a deal. So.
Right. And you're preparing for those what ifs. And I like to say that when you're doing that elite level of planning for the what ifs and how you want to think, feel, and respond, you pick that worst case scenario, or you pick 2 or 3 of the most likely scenarios. Yeah. And I hope that those never happen to you. But, even if they do, or something else happens, you're more prepared. So even if you prepare for situation A and Z comes and you never prepared for it, if you prepared with how you want to think, feel, and respond, that will still show up. And part of that is something a lot of people already teach. Again, we're already teaching this out there. The whole spin the clock thing. You've heard that, right? Or look at your watch. The idea behind that is take a breath. That's mental performance training. Again, very simple techniques, just layered together. Pause. Yeah. Take a breath.
Well, that's great. I like as a technique to have my students or anybody I fly with a flight review to study. I encourage people to study one emergency procedure before every flight. Those things in there are the things that are the ABCs that could happen, but the XYZs you're going to handle by knowing your systems, know your aircraft, be familiar with it, because something might happen that's not in the book. But you need to know if it's in the book or not. And if you've never looked at the emergency procedures, you may not know that there's a simple little procedure for dealing with this or that. So,
yeah.
yeah.
There was actually a woman who I did one-on-one coaching with back when I was doing that. And she thought that she was like, she's older and she had some grandchildren and she was nervous to go flying. And she thought it was because she said, I shouldn't be doing this. I have grandchildren and a daughter. What if something happens to me? And once we actually dissected it, it came down to the fact that she didn't trust herself to respond to an emergency properly. And so I just, taught her what you just did. Say, hey, pick an emergency and go through one emergency every day for 30 days and then recycle it, where you keep going through these and it'll get easier and easier.
Yeah, just having seen it, it's in your head makes a huge difference than if you've never looked at it before. You don't have to memorize it, but knowing it was there and having seen it makes a big difference. We could go on for hours about this, but you believe it, like we've already gone through most of the program. We're going to have you back at some time to do that and talk more about this, because I think it's a great topic. There's no technology in place really to teach us a mental performance that I know of, but we can learn about disorientation. So I do try to teach some things about that. And there are, I know even in the Air Force, you guys use things, and GA also uses like the Barony chair, the spinning chair, to try to teach people that they really, the lesson is that, hey, you can't rely on your gut feel or the seat of your pants to tell you what the airplane's doing, that you need to learn your instruments and rely on them. The co-pilot that I just flew with told me a really fun exercise that he said they would spin them around in a chair for a while, get them really dizzy, and then stop it. And they had to point the laser at a target, and then they scored each other on that. It was really funny. Interestingly enough, also, the flight simulators, they're great for getting procedures down. They're not going to teach you how to handle G's or how to ignore the G's that you feel, the sensations you feel. So it doesn't replace the G sensations that, like if you do steep turns in a simulator, as you can guess, it's going to be a lot different when you do them in the airplane. So we'll move on from that. I knew technology section would be really, really quick. So it is what it is. Is there anything else that you want to add to that before we move on to our game show?
No, let's do the game show.
All right, let's do that. So the next section, and this is a little bit different this time, it's going to be a lot more fun, is our game show for the Schiff Show. So tonight, you can join and participate live. We're going to keep track of your answers, and highest scores win prizes. There'll be some participation things. We've got some great prizes lined up. So if you're on a device, the internet browser, go to the schiffshow.tv/game show to join it. You can also point your phone, and if you're on a PC right now, you can use your phone to participate in the game. This QR will remain on the screen for a few screens while I go over a little bit of the explanation. But so you're going to go to the schiffshow.tv/game show, and you'll be directed to the game show site, which looks like this. And then you'll enter your name and email address. You can enter your first name and last initial, or a nickname if you would like to remain anonymous. Whatever you want in there, just try to keep it clean or we'll knock you out. You might be asked to verify your email address, and you'll get a 5-digit code to enter. That's for your security and ours. And when you're ready, go ahead and click on join, and you'll be ready to test your knowledge with your next question. So we're ready to get into it. The next thing is when a question pops up, you'll read the question, select your answer, click on the green send button to submit your answer, and you can change your answer anytime before the time is up. So watch the timer, but remember, the faster you answer, the more points you get. So if you change your answer, it's going to reset that time. Also remember, watch the timer, because if you're out of time and you don't answer anything, you're not going to get any points or credit for that question. You'll see the results after the question. Winners and standings will be published in my follow-up email. So again, if you're not subscribed to the email, my emails, go to my website, the schiffshow.tv, and click on the subscribe to Schiff Show email up on the top link of the web page. I promise you, nobody's going to get that email address. We don't give it to anybody. I've had people ask me, I'm like, nope, we don't share it. We're only using it for this purpose. I've taken great lengths of not requiring email addresses and registration for that very purpose. So without further ado, let's go on. Thank you to Dad for these questions that are going to be in today's quiz. So let's get to it. Without further ado, let's hit question 1. And I know some of you might still be connecting, so I'll stall a little bit. But a Beach Bonanza and a Malibu Mirage, and I promise you this will be the most difficult one tonight, have a wing area of 187.8 and 183.8 respectively, pretty close, and square feet, and a max gross weights of 3,850 and 4,300 pounds. So one is obviously heavier than the other. All else equal, which airplane experiences the greatest G load in response to a given vertical gust? The Bonanza, because it has a lighter wing loading, the Mirage, because it has a lighter wing loading, or the Bonanza because it has a heavier wing loading, or the Mirage because it has a heavier wing loading. Which one will have the greatest G load in response to a given vertical gust? Which one is going to feel, more like it's more turbulent, have more of an effect, more vertical speed gust, bigger effect from the same gust? Which one? So it has to do with obviously wing loading and maybe a little math. We have to do pilot math. We don't do that when we're flying. We're not flying right now, so that's okay. But the answer is I know everybody knows it already. You should have submitted by now, but the answer is the Bonanza because it has a lighter wing loading. The B-36TC and the PA-46 have wing loadings, which is the gross weight divided by the wing area of 20.5 and 23.4. Because the PA-46 is heavier, it has a higher wing loading. The Bonanza has a lower or lighter wing loading, which results in the most acceleration or G load. So that is the answer to that one. Answer A on that. The Bonanza because it has a lighter wing loading. All right. We're going to move on to question number 2. A Cessna 172 has only one static port. Not in this particular 172. Not all of them are like that. Which is on the left side of the fuselage. If a forward slip is performed at a given indicated airspeed, which is safer, a left or right slip? So static port on the left side. When you slip to the right, you're exposing that static port into the wind. If you slip to the left, you're exposing the static port into the wing. Here I'm confusing you, into the wind. If you slip to the right wing down, you're now, the static port on the left side is kind of on the leeward side. So which one, left or right, because the indicated airspeed is higher or lower than what you're actually flying? So again, static port on the left, slipping left or right. Which one is safer and why? As we move on, all CFIs are probably all done answering this, getting the higher points. They will get easier, but it's a good lesson to know here. What is the answer? Which one is the best way to slip? Well, it's actually the left slip because the indicated airspeed is lower. During a left slip, ram air from the left enters the static port, pressurizing the static line a little bit and, to the airspeed indicator. This reduces the indicated airspeed that's indicating because basically you take static in your static port, static in your pitot tube, and they cancel each other out. What's left is the ram you get from your pitot tube. Well, when you've got ram coming in your static port, it's less difference because it's fighting the other side of the system. Basically, you're going to get a lower indicated airspeed. It will indicate lower than you're really flying. During a right slip, of course, the indicated airspeed is greater than it should be. That's less safe because you might be compelled to fly even slower when you see that indicated airspeed. So I tell students that if the airplane has only one static port, which is on the left side of the fuselage, when you slip left, you as the pilot are lower, so fly lower, a lower speed. If you are slipping to the right, you're higher, so fly a higher speed. You will indicate a higher speed than you're actually flying. One that, a lot of people get wrapped around with that. We'll have to maybe do a whole episode on that. In any event, let's go on to number 3. True or false? You're flying a typical single-engine airplane with a fixed-pitch propeller, and you enter a dive and accelerate to VNE, the never exceed speed, red line, with the throttle fully closed. You should anticipate that the engine RPM will exceed red line. Or will it not? True or false? You'll exceed red line if you do a VNE dive with a power at idle in a single-engine fixed-pitch propeller airplane. One of the two is true. Will you get, or, are they designed so that it stops right at red line with power at idle at VNE or not? Give you a few more questions to put in your answers on that one. So true or false? Typical single, fixed pitch prop, dive at VNE, throttle closed. Will the, true or false? You'll get an RPM that exceeds red line. The answer is, now Tammy, you didn't fly those airplanes. You're probably looking at this going, what do I know about that? What do I care about that? The answer is, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I actually had to get a single engine add-on.
Oh, how'd you feel about that?
It was fun.
Oh, good. It's true. The aircraft certification regulations allow up to 10% overspeed under these conditions, but this should be avoided because propeller and engine damage could eventually occur. The regulation you're looking for is 23.45, which contains the 10% RPM allowance of VNE. I think I've actually put that in here if I click one more time. That in closed throttle dive, there's a 10% RPM allowance in that situation. So in any event, let's move on to question number 4, our second to last. We have 5 questions. Question 4, true or false? Is it possible? I'm sorry, it is possible. True or false? It is possible for an airplane to be descending without its pilot being aware of it. In other words, the altimeter is not moving. You are descending, but the altimeter is not moving. Your altimeter, all systems work. Nothing is stuck. If you were actually to push, the altimeter would unwind. If you were to pull, it would go up. Is it possible for you to actually be descending without the pilot being aware of it, without the altimeter moving, with everything working? True or false? Can you be climbing or descending without seeing your altimeter move when it is working? It's a fun one. Obviously, you're thinking, well, he wouldn't ask this if it were false. I might. I might mess with you. So we'll wait for some more of the answers to come in. Can the airplane climb or descend without a pilot knowing it? Altimeter won't move. The answer, believe it or not, is true. When flying into colder air or lowering atmospheric pressure, remember the high to low, hot to cold, look out below, that's because you're actually descending when you do that. If you're flying into an area that's colder, you're actually, to follow your altimeter and keep your needle right on the zero, you will be actually descending, getting closer to the earth. Likewise, when you're flying into lower pressure, same thing. In cold air, all of the, it's a little bit less than 1 inch per 1,000 when you're colder than standard. So all of those little lines of 1,000 feet kind of get closer together and you're descending. I could draw it for you, but you'll have to just look at the course resources. All right, our last question. Question number 5. True or false? I know, true or false. They're easier to type, that's why I do them. True or false? You are making a visual, can't see it on the glasses, straight in approach to a runway with a pronounced upslope. So the runway slopes uphill away from you, and you're making a visual approach straight in. You will tend to overshoot the normal touchdown zone. So what do pilots normally, now we're talking about illusions, does a pilot normally overshoot or undershoot with an upslope? So true or false, you're making a visual straight in approach to a runway with a pronounced upslope. You will tend to overshoot the normal touchdown zone with an upslope. True or false? Giving time for people to answer. I'm supposed to bore you with whatever I can do to make this last longer and give everybody time to answer. If
Have you flown into one of these? Have you flown?
Yeah, I have. And downslope. There's a downslope. It's the opposite answer. But if you haven't answered by now, you're not going to get very many points for this. So, what is the answer to this one? The answer is false. You will tend to overshoot. So, a pronounced downslope most often leads to an overshoot. An upslope gives the perception that you're too high. If you just picture a runway tilting, away from you, or up, away from you, or down, away from you. So you'll descend below the normal path and come in low because of the visual perception that you get. A downslope gives the perception that you're low because, picture if you have enough of a downslope, you're looking straight down the runway like you're at the same altitude if you were to extend that pavement out. So you'll tend to climb above the normal glide path because of that perception, and then you'll come in high. Well, listen, thanks for playing. Winners and standings will be published in my follow-up email. And again, if you're not subscribed, go to theschiffshow.tv and click on the subscribe to Schiff Show email here, link at the top of the page. I'm not going to do anything with those emails. We're just going to use it for this. And also we'll be keeping track of everybody's scores. I'd like to end with a quote. I love this, that flying teaches us more than just how to handle an airplane. It teaches patience, humility. If it doesn't teach humility, I want you to find a way for it to start teaching you humility. You're not doing it right. And the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've earned your place above the clouds. And I just love that. And I did take that picture at work about 4 days ago. So I am the owner of that picture. And no, I didn't take it at work. I'm sorry. We're not allowed to do that. I actually took that in my airplane the other day. I'd like to say thank you to Avemco for making this show possible. They are sponsoring it. We're providing it to you at no charge, and they are making that possible. So if you mention that you watch the Schiff Show, you'll get a discount on your premium, so be sure and do that. If you don't use Avemco, give them a call and get a quote. I think they are the premier general aviation insurer, so be sure and do that. I'd also like to thank Tammy for joining us. I want to talk to you some more. We're going to have you back. There's Tammy's website. It's also going to be in the follow-up email, and it's also in the course resources to this program. So thank you, Tammy.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. We'll have you back. So there's more to talk about on this for sure. Keep an eye out for my monthly column. Another one just came out. That'll also be in the email. I appreciate that. Next month, we have Greg Riverdow. I'm trying to click this little thing. From the founder and CEO of Pilot Institute. And they are doing some fantastic things with technology, including virtual reality in aviation training. Join us on February 12th at 7 p.m. Central Time here on the schiffshow.tv, and you'll see some of the fun things. And I think we're going to get them to give away some of their fun training programs as well. You're going to get a real kick out of that. We'll look at the accident with their technology. With that, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And remember, 2 speeds, slow or screw up. Good night, everyone.